The victim had been shot once in the chest and once in the arm.
After Guadalupe killed her, she had a broken hyoid bone, like she was maybe choked.
They came in the house. William was hollering about, what the hell is going on? What did you get me into?
The sentencing of Valbona Lucaj and Sebastiano Quagliata was an emotional moment in Lapeer County Circuit Court as they faced the consequences of their deadly negligence. The couple sat handcuffed in jail uniforms, awaiting their fate after their two dogs fatally attacked Craig Sitzma while he was jogging in Metamora Township. The court heard from Craig Sitzma's mother, Jacques Sitzma, who struggled to hold back tears as she addressed the judge. In a rare display of grace, she acknowledged not only her family's pain, but also the impact this case had on the defendants.
I'm not heartless. I feel for the defendants as well and their family. It's been a tragedy for all of us. But in the end, we have to obey laws. We have to be accountable for what has happened.
Despite the family's compassion, the judge described the couple's actions as grossly negligent, emphasizing that laws must be followed and accountability upheld. Lucaj and Quagliata were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to a maximum of 15 years in prison, though they could be released after just 4 years. A solemn atmosphere filled the Leon County Courthouse as Tallahassee Police Department officers gathered in support of Officer Christopher Ferriello's family. The incident began when Tyrone Cleveland held his wife and daughters and point before shooting all three. He fled the scene in his car, speeding through North Monroe and Capitol Circle. In a tragic turn, he collided head-on with Officer Ferriello's patrol car, leading to the officer's passing. During the sentencing hearing, Ferriello's family and friends shared heartfelt tributes. His cousin described him as a kind and selfless hero, emphasizing that his legacy would endure far beyond this tragedy.
When I think about my cousin, I will not let the memory of you taint my image of him. At the end of the day, I know my big cousin, my hero, was one of the most amazing and kindest souls in the world. He will forever be one of my biggest role models, and you will be nothing but a rock stuck to the bottom of my shoe. You will forever be a nobody, and my cousin will be a hero. Even though he is now gone, I know my family and I will be forever grateful for all the memories we got to create.
Cleveland's wife asked for understanding, acknowledging the pain caused by his actions.
I want to apologize for my husband. I know it don't change anything, and I'm not gonna say he was not wrong. We were all victims, just as well as y'all lost y'all loved one, we lost him too. I just hope and pray that y'all find it in y'all heart to forgive him, because you need the peace to be able to go on. Regardless of how you feel, life do go on.
She expressed that her family had also suffered a loss and hoped that Ferriello's loved ones could find peace.
The court will now impose the sentence. If you could please rise for that sentence. On counts 1 through 4, the court adjudicates you guilty, will sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
To avoid the death penalty, Tyrone Cleveland accepted a plea agreement and was sentenced by Leon Circuit Judge Joshua Hawks to life in prison. His sentence covered charges of murdering Officer Christopher Ferriello and attempting to harm his wife and 2 daughters. Though the ruling brought legal closure, the impact of Officer Ferriello's death remained deeply felt by his family, colleagues, and the community. Harold Phillips, a father of 6, was walking home from the bus stop after a trip to the mall when he was attacked by 3 dogs that had escaped through an unsecured gate. The dogs, owned by Roy and Trevina Goodman, inflicted fatal injuries, and Phillips later passed away from his wounds.
To have to close the casket on him so soon. He was only 35. I never imagined having to watch him die so tragically.
In court, Phillips' wife expressed grief and frustration, emphasizing that the owners knew the dogs were dangerous and should have taken precautions to prevent such a tragedy.
Since the owners knew the dogs was vicious, they immediately should have muzzled. And my dad didn't deserve that.
Trevina declined to speak, but Roy addressed the victim's family, saying,
"So sorry. I wish it wouldn't have happened. I'm so sorry.
The judge found the Goodmans responsible for failing to control their animals. Roy Goodman was sentenced to 30 months to 15 years in prison, while Trevina Goodman received 3 years of probation. As part of the case resolution, the 3 dogs involved in the attack were euthanized. While the sentencing provided legal closure, the loss of Harold Phillips remained a painful reality for his family and community. The events leading to the Chili's double homicide of Christopher Hicks and Stephen Goodknecht began when William Wood, who had been staying with Tracy Brown for several weeks, discussed committing a robbery. Wanting to help, Brown contacted her nephew, Jerome Pinkert, to obtain a firearm. She told Pinkert that the gun was needed for the robbery of a drug dealer, unaware that it would later be used in a murder.
The gun that you provided to William Wood, the high point 9mm Ruger semi-automatic pistol, where did you get that?
I got it from my nephew.
And what's your nephew? And you obtained that for purposes of committing a robbery?
Yeah, to rob a dealer, yes.
And you provided that to William Wood for purposes of committing a robbery?
Yeah.
Once she secured the weapon, Brown handed it over to Wood. On the night of the crime, she also arranged for Ronald Green to drive Wood to the scene. Hours later, Wood and Green returned to her home, where Wood confessed to the shooting.
When they came in the house and William was hollering about and Brown was like, what the hell is going on? What did you get me into?
Green, realizing he wasn't receiving any money from the robbery, became frustrated. At that moment, Brown understood the severity of what had happened and ordered both men to leave her home.
And she has been nothing but remorseful about even getting involved with it, and so that's...
Did she know the extent to which she was getting involved?
No. No, I think she just thought that, that he was gonna grab some money and some maybe whatever from a drug dealer.
Tracy Brown provided a gun to William Wood, an operable illegal hint that she knew was going to be used in a robbery. She didn't have to know that William Wood was going to kill anybody, and it's likely that she didn't know.
Authorities later arrested all those involved. William Wood was convicted of murdering Hicks and Goodknecht and was sentenced to life in prison without parole and faces the possibility of the death penalty. Ronald Green, who initially faced second-degree murder charges, later pleaded guilty to first-degree robbery. As part of his plea deal, he testified against Wood in court. Other individuals were also sentenced for their roles in the crime. Ryan Brown was convicted of withholding information, while Tracy Brown and Jerome Pinkert were sentenced for providing the firearm. During Tracy Brown's sentence hearing, the court heard victim impact statements.
Chris Hicks will never get married. Steve will never walk his daughter down the aisle. Steve will never watch his kids graduate high school and college. All because of Tracy Brown's choices.
Tracy Brown received a 21-year prison sentence with 5 years of post-release supervision. By accepting a plea deal, Brown avoided murder charges in exchange for cooperating with the federal prosecution of Wood. A tragic accident on Jericho Avenue's steep incline claimed the life of 18-year-old Neve Downs, leading to the sentencing of her best friend, 19-year-old Ella Vesey. The incident occurred when Vesey and Downs took turns driving over the hill, attempting to catch air. According to authorities, Vesey approached the blind hill at over 100 miles per hour, lost control when startled by an oncoming vehicle, and crashed into a tree, resulting in Downs passing.
I live just off Jericho, and I heard a huge boom. It sounds like a car hit a tree. Do you think it came from what street? I think Jericho, in between the high school and 10 Mile. Okay, hold on just a second. Do you hear yelling? There's people screaming.
In court, Vise expressed deep remorse, saying she wished she could bring her best friend back.
I wake up every day, and I wish I still had my best friend. I understand that no words could ever make up for the actions that I caused, but I am truly sorry.
Downs' mother, in a letter to the judge, requested that Veille receive community service instead of jail time, a plea that Vise's attorney described as an extraordinary act of compassion. The defense emphasized that Jericho Hill has a history of attracting thrill-seeking drivers, arguing that its design makes it especially dangerous.
It was profound, impactful, moving, and quite frankly, an extension of Christian grace. It is no excuse here, but this jump is a hazard.
Judge Mark Trusock acknowledged these concerns, urging the Kent County Road Commission to take steps to prevent future tragedies.
You can't see what's happening until you get up to the very, very top. Quite frankly, I haven't seen a road like that anywhere in the Lower Peninsula.
Before delivering the sentence, Judge Trusock reminded Vici that she would carry the weight of this loss for the rest of her life.
You are going to have to live with this the rest of your life.
He also expressed hope that Downs' passing would serve as a cautionary reminder to others about the dangers of reckless driving. Vake, originally facing a felony charge, pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor moving violation causing death. The judge sentenced her to 4 months in jail, 2 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service. On January 16, 2017, a celebration at Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Park in Miami-Dade County turned into chaos when gunfire erupted around 3:40 p.m. The event, meant to honor the civil rights leader, was suddenly disrupted as bullets struck multiple attendees. Dozens of people were at the park that day, and 8 were shot and injured. The last of those victims was released from the hospital.
I'm just glad. It's no hard feelings. I just want to go home and go on with my life.
As the investigation progressed, authorities identified Gerald Brownlee, 18, and Robert Britt, 17, as suspects. Witnesses reportedly placed both individuals at the scene using a photo lineup. Authorities suggested the shooting stemmed from a confrontation between 2 rival gangs, escalating into an exchange of that left bystanders caught in the crossfire. Both Brownlee and Britt were arrested and charged with attempted second-degree murder. Brownlee faced additional charges for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and carrying a concealed weapon, while Britt was charged with possession of a firearm by a minor.
Right, the charges are attempted second-degree murder and 1 count of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon or delinquent.
During his bond hearing, Brownlee appeared before a judge while his case moved forward.
Mr. Brownlee is already out on bond in firearm charges and has yet again picked up another firearm charge in addition to the heinous nature of this crime.
I'm concerned he poses a danger to the community, so the bonds will remain count 1, $1 million, and count 2, $10,000.
In February 2017, the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office announced that the attempted second-degree murder charges against both suspects were dropped. The decision came after conflicting witness testimonies and legal complications involving Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Despite the dismissal of these charges, Brownlee remained in custody due to an unrelated weapons case, while Britt was released. Jordan Watts and Ben Taylor, 2 students with promising futures, lost their lives after unknowingly consuming drugs laced with fentanyl. Their tragic deaths set off an investigation that led authorities to the individuals responsible for selling the lethal substances. Using evidence gathered from the victims' text messages, law enforcement worked to track down those involved in the distribution of the drugs.
They were buying and selling from each other. Who sold the pills that went into the 2 mouths of the boys who unfortunately died? We don't know.
With the help of a confidential informant, Moreno police detectives successfully identified and arrested Alec Donovan, Lucas Cuellar, and Taylor Winters.
The opioid case got me investigating the drug portion of it. From there, I was able to determine that drug dealing was one of the main factors in the case.
Inside the courtroom, emotions ran high as families and community members confronted the devastating impact of these crimes. One of the victims' mothers urged that the focus should not only be on punishment, but also on addressing the larger issue of drug abuse and its growing impact.
I feel a little vindicated. It's not that I'm out for revenge. I just want these to stop being placed in the hands of other children and just to make the community safer.
There was also mention of another individual who may have played a role in the case, but reportedly received only a minor charge. Officials, however, declined to comment further on that matter. Following the legal proceedings, sentencing was handed down.
I want you to never have to be in the position of being in the chain of events that led to the death of another human being, or in this case, 2. Don't let that leave you. Use it and change.
Taylor Winters received 3 to 10 years for felony drug possession and an additional 1 to 3 years for possessing a firearm with its serial number removed. Lucas Cuellar was sentenced to 1 to 4 years for possession of a firearm as an addict and 1 to 3 years for felony drug possession, with both sentences served concurrently. Alec Donovan, in contrast, was sentenced to 5 years probation with 90 days of GPS monitoring. Montana Baronet, once known as Baltimore's most dangerous gunman, led a violent drug operation based in the Sandtown neighborhood. In 2015, he and a group of masked men fired near the University of Maryland Baltimore campus, an attack that left multiple victims, including innocent bystanders. Among those was Antonio Addison, who was shot on his grandmother's front steps.
But I really returned back just to the evidence. It's difficult for me, and I think it's difficult for anyone, to really get inside the head of someone else to understand what their life is like and what they're thinking.
During the court proceedings, Antonio's mother, Valencia Bullock, expressed her grief and questioning how anyone could be capable of such cruelty. Baronet himself addressed the courtroom, apologizing to one victim's family.
Now, Baronet apologized to one victim's family, saying the victim spoke up and she described his life growing up that included going to church, was a good friend, and a relative, his sister, Baronet's sister.
The trial was marred by reports of witness intimidation, making the case even more complex. Additionally, 3 of Baronet's co-defendants faced charges of assaulting U.S. Marshals, who escorted them to court each day. When it came time for sentencing, Judge Blake made it clear that Baronet had yet to fully grasp the weight of his actions. She remarked that perhaps one day he would understand the gravity of what he had done, but that day had not yet come. With no other choice, she handed down 2 life sentences, ensuring that Baronet would spend the rest of his life behind bars. On February 22, 2017, a tragic crime unfolded in East Macon, Georgia, when 67-year-old Jimmy Lee Daniel was discovered dead from gunshot wounds in his home on Elder Street. The Bibb County Sheriff's Office launched an intensive investigation into the mysterious homicide, seeking to unravel the events that led to Daniel's untimely death. As detectives dived into the case, they identified 54-year-old Philip Lance Rosier Sr. as the prime suspect. The breakthrough came after a tip submitted to Crime Stoppers led authorities to Rosier's location. On March 1, 2017, Rosier was apprehended at a residence on Carroll Street in Macon. His arrest marked a significant development in the investigation, and charges against him began to solidify. During a commitment hearing, Bibb County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Shirley, provided testimony linking Rosier to Daniel's murder. The court denied Rosier's bond, ensuring he remained in custody as the legal process continued. The violent nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the East Macon community, leaving residents deeply concerned about safety in the area.
You're Mr. Philip Rosier. Okay, Mr. Rosier, you're here for a commitment here on the charge of 1 count of murder. Okay, Investigator Shirley, I need you to raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony that you're about to give is true, so help you God?
I do.
State your name and case, please.
Investigator Daniel Shirley, Macon Bibb County Sheriff's Office, Violent Crimes Unit. Your Honor, on February the 22nd, 2017, the body of Jimmy Daniels was located inside his apartment at 967 Elder Street. The victim shared this apartment with Mr. Philip Rosier. The victim had been shot once in the chest and once in the arm. He was found lying on his kitchen floor on his back. Now, during the investigation, a witness came forward on the scene, which I spoke with. This witness informed me that 2 days prior to discovering the body, that Mr. Rosier had informed him that he was going to kill the victim, Mr. Jimmy Daniel. And the reason for this was due to the fact that the victim supposedly had stolen some items from Mr. Rosier. This same witness also informed me that after the murder, he followed Mr. Rosier to Magnolia and Ramona Avenue, where he witnessed Mr. Rosier throw a black plastic bag into a drain. This witness took me to this location. I looked inside the drain. I saw a black plastic bag. Upon retrieving that bag, I located a 38 caliber pistol along with 2 pairs of brass knuckles. This pistol was fully loaded and had 3 spent shell casings in it. Another witness also came forward and stated that before, after the murder, that Mr. Rozier came to his residence and informed him that he had in fact shot Mr. Daniel. Warrants were issued for Mr. Rozier. He was picked up on March the 1st. He was brought to the Detective Bureau, at which time he declined to give a statement, and he was transported here to the Bibb County LEC.
So the second witness you spoke of, that's not the first witness?
No, sir.
Okay. And that witness came forward,
I'm sorry.
How did that witness come about?
I received information that this witness, in fact, had information and wanted to talk to me, so I went to his residence and made contact with him and obtained a statement from him.
Okay. And who is the witness that said that they followed Mr. Rozier?
His identity?
Mm-hmm.
Due to the safety of these witnesses, I would not like to identify their names at this time.
Okay. Do you know how many people were on the scene when you were there?
People as in
There's a
residents,
police report here
neighbors.
that says that there was a gathering of people.
Yes,
across
there
the
was,
street, and that's
there were a
when
lot
you
of, yes, there were several people from the neighborhood or more than several people, large gathering in the area.
And did you interview all those witnesses?
We attempted to speak with the people on the scene, but due to the fact that the information that we had received was that a lot of people in the neighborhood were scared of Mr. Rozier, and they declined to speak at that time.
Was Mr. Rozier part of that same gathering?
Mr. Rozier was on the scene at the time.
And did you interview him?
I did get a statement from him.
And what was that?
Mr. Rozier informed me that the last time that he saw Mr. Daniel was on Monday, 2 days before the discovery of the body. But he had left the apartment on Monday and went across town and stayed with his sister-in-law. Mr. Rozier also stated that on that Wednesday, on the 22nd, he returned to the apartment, went inside to gather some things, at which time he found Mr. Daniel laying on the floor dead. He said that he left and walked out of the apartment and called 911. Now, we were able to disprove that by the first witness that I spoke with, because he came forward that night on the scene and said that he, in fact, was the one that called 911, not Mr. Rozier. We checked the 911 records, and in fact, it was the witness who called 911 and not Mr. Rozier.
Does that witness live in the neighborhood?
He lives in the area.
Okay. And when you found the bag, was there any fingerprints or?
Those items that we located in the drain have been sent off for testing to the trial, and I'm awaiting results on that now.
Okay.
One other thing, if I may, Your Honor. The 38 that was found, we conducted a search of 967 Elder, and I searched Mr. Rozier's bedroom. 38 caliber rounds, in fact, numerous 38 caliber rounds were found in his bedroom.
In an unforeseen turn of events, Philip Lance Rozier Sr. passed away in August 2018, bringing the legal case against him to an abrupt and unresolved end. His death left the tragic murder of Jimmy Lee Daniel without a definitive conclusion, denying Daniel's family and the community the justice and closure they had been seeking. On November 10, 2018, Amy Mullis was found gravely injured on her family farm in Earlville, Iowa. She had been helping with chores but left to retrieve a pet carrier from a shed. When she did not return, her son, Tristan, went to check and discovered her lying on the ground. Todd Mullis, her husband, rushed to the scene, removed the rake, and attempted CPR before driving her toward the hospital while calling 911. Emergency responders took over, but Amy did not survive. Initially, her injuries appeared accidental, but an autopsy later revealed multiple wounds, leading authorities to rule her passing as a homicide. As the investigation unfolded, suspicions turned toward Todd. Authorities discovered that Amy had been having an affair with Jerry Frasher, a farm worker, and had confided in friends that she feared for her life if Todd ever found out. Digital evidence revealed Google searches from Todd's device related to harming an unfaithful spouse. Security footage from the farm was missing key time frames, and there were no signs of forced entry or evidence suggesting another suspect. By February 2019, Todd was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His trial took place in September 2019. Prosecutors argued that he had acted out of rage over Amy's infidelity and fear of losing his farm in a divorce. Forensic evidence showed that her injuries were inconsistent with a single fall. Witnesses testified that she had been terrified of Todd in the months leading up to her death. The prosecution also introduced his troubling Google searches and played the 911 call, suggesting that Todd whispered a derogatory remark about Amy while performing CPR. This claim was disputed, but the state used it to reinforce his alleged motive. Todd's defense countered that investigators had rushed to judgment and ignored the possibility of another assailant. His lawyers conceded that Amy had been murdered, but argued that Todd was not responsible. However, they failed to bring in forensic experts to challenge the prosecution's claims. Todd took the stand in his own defense, denying involvement.
Before I pronounce judgment, is there anything you would like to say today?
I did not do this. This is supposed to be America where you have a fair chance of proving your innocence. But you shouldn't have to prove your innocence. Instead of the other way around. I thought it was guilty until, or innocent until proven guilty. I feel this is the other way around. And I was a faithful and loving husband, and I never did this.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Hamrick, do you have anybody else that would like to speak on behalf of your client?
No, Judge.
Are there any victims that wish to be heard today?
Not live testimony, Your Honor. The state did file a victim impact statement, and we would just ask that Your Honor read that.
Okay. And there is a victim impact statement in the court file. I have read that, and I have conferred with counsel to make sure that they have had the opportunity to see that, and both parties have had the opportunity to see the victim impact statement. I will take that into consideration as if it were offered here live at the sentencing hearing. Defense counsel indicated that the sentence in this case is mandatory. He's right, it is mandatory. There's really no discretion as to the punishment handed down. According to the statute, Mr. Mullis, for the charge of murder in the first degree pursuant to Iowa Code Section 707.2, you are sentenced to life in prison with no opportunity for parole. There will be no fine issued. You'll be required to submit a DNA sample to the state of Iowa. The reasons for my sentence today are primarily the statutory requirement, the fact that there is no discretion. I will also require you to pay a victim restitution to the victim or to the estate of the victim in the amount of $150,000. You will be obligated to pay the court costs associated with this proceeding.
The jury ultimately found him guilty of first-degree murder. In 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After his conviction, Todd appealed, arguing that the evidence against him was circumstantial and that his defense had been ineffective. The Iowa Court of Appeals upheld the verdict, stating that the case against him was strong.
His wife, Amy Mullis's death was a tragic accident. He always believed this because he was on his family farm the day that she was injured. He was there right after his son Tristan found her. He was there as he and his son Tristan tried to give Miss Mullis emergency aid and rushed her to where EMTs could get her to the hospital. He was there when first responders treated her injuries like they were the result of an accident. And he was not aware of any information that would tell him that what happened to her was anything other than an accident. Even when police began an investigation and began to treat him like a suspect, he did not stop believing that what happened to Miss Mullis was an accident. He knew he had nothing to do with her death, and he didn't believe that there was any evidence that anyone else did either. His account of what happened and his beliefs, unlike the accounts of some of the people that you're going to hear in this post-conviction trial during this week, has always been the same. The court's going to hear evidence that he begged his attorneys, begged them all through pretrial preparation to investigate this case as an accident. The court's going to hear evidence that his lawyers disregarded what he was telling them. The court's going to hear evidence that his lawyers did not talk to experts or fact witnesses that would have helped them understand and present a case that this was an accident. And the court's going to hear evidence that his lawyers did not listen to his explicit direction to investigate these issues and to pursue this case as an accident. And because his attorneys did not listen to him, because his attorneys did not investigate or present these issues, the jury did not hear important evidence that they needed to hear to understand that the state's case was simply wrong. The jury heard the exact opposite of what Todd Mullis asked his lawyers to present. They heard his own lawyer in opening statements tell the jury that Todd didn't know what he was talking about, that Ms. Mullis was murdered. They heard his own lawyer, in effect, tell the jury that Mr. Mullis was not credible. They heard his own lawyer make these concessions on day one, right when this trial began, and then really have no defense to present on Todd's behalf. His lawyers conceded guilt in this case without any plan to present another defense. The court is going to hear evidence that Todd didn't agree to this plan. He didn't know this was the plan. He'd actually asked his attorneys to do the opposite. And at this point in the proceedings, the court has heard in various pleadings at other hearings that we've had, the PCR team for Todd repeat this to you over and over again in all of the filings, that this was an accident, that this is what this case is about. And we've repeated that to the court because it's true. And it's among just the many reasons that Todd Mullis deserves a new trial and what this court is going to hear at this hearing. On behalf of Mr. Mullis and his team, we're grateful that after all this time that Mr. Mullis is able to be in court this morning to remedy this wrong. Nobody listened to Todd at trial, but this week he'll have an opportunity to be heard through this case.
Todd filed for post-conviction relief, claiming that his trial lawyers had failed him by conceding that Amy's death was a homicide and neglecting expert testimony that could have supported the possibility of an accident.
And that the court is going to hear his claims and his evidence this week. And everything that this court is going to hear is going to establish that the underlying trial that Todd had was nothing short of fundamentally unfair. It was unfair because of the actions that his trial counsel failed to take, that any reasonable attorney would have done on Todd's behalf. It was unfair because the state withheld from Todd important favorable evidence that would have undermined confidence in the outcome of this trial. And it was unfair because the trial prosecutors did things that resulted in misconduct in how they presented the case and what they presented. And the court's going to hear evidence that makes clear that Todd Mullis was right. As we said, the court will hear that Todd's attorneys conceded right at the beginning of this trial that this was a murder. And with that sort of tent pole in the state's case, the state killing the jury and nobody disagreeing that Ms. Mullis was murdered, that resulted in a situation where there was really no meaningful adversarial testing of any of the evidence that the state presented. And the court's going to hear evidence about each of these issues this week.
His new legal team also alleged that the prosecution withheld key evidence, including potential DNA findings from Amy's fingernails and medical records related to her recent surgery.
The court's going to hear from an expert, Sean Castle, who's going to explain that the family's Google search history and electronic data from their home is exactly what it appears to be. Google searches from a family, from teens, from preteens that are using Google to search for things, sometimes random things, as we would all expect teens to do. And the court is also going to hear from depositions, from documentary evidence that makes clear that anything that anyone testified to about at trial about Todd is going to be a product of them being told that their friend was murdered. And believing their friend to be murdered made statements that were hearsay, that were innuendo, that don't aid in understanding what happened.
In the 2025 post-conviction hearing, new forensic experts testified that Amy's injuries could have been accidental, contradicting the state's case. The defense also challenged the claim that Todd had whispered an incriminating remark on the 911 call, arguing that the interpretation was flawed. With the hearing concluded, the judge's ruling on whether Todd will be granted a new trial remains pending. Todd maintains his innocence, and his case continues to raise questions. If the court grants a new trial, he will have another chance to fight for his freedom. If denied, he will remain in prison for life. The final decision is now in the hands of the court. Guadalupe Contreras had a complicated family history. He was first married to Alice Diaz, and both became parents of 2. Later, he married Elizabeth Contreras, Alice's half-sister. Though their marriage ended, Guadalupe and Elizabeth continued communicating in secrecy. Elizabeth, who had health issues, repeatedly asked to be added to Guadalupe's health insurance, but he resisted, fearing personal complications.
The defendant some time ago was married to a woman named Alice Diaz. They have 2 kids. Their kids are adults now. Elizabeth Contreras was married to a man named Joe. Guadalupe left Alice, Elizabeth left Joe, and married Guadalupe. That marriage didn't last terribly long. They split up. Guadalupe went back to Alice, and Elizabeth went back to live with Joe and their young daughter. Alice and Elizabeth are half-sisters, okay? So as you can imagine, it's kind of a messy family dynamic. Elizabeth and Guadalupe still had some sort of a relationship at the time of her death in August of 2017, but most of the family was in the dark about the nature and the extent of that relationship. Elizabeth even carried an extra cell phone that she would communicate with the defendant on. Alice was unaware of this. Joe knew that Elizabeth still communicated with Guadalupe. He didn't like it, didn't like Guadalupe, as you can imagine, right? He let Guadalupe know that, okay? So that was the dynamics at the time of her murder. In August of 2017, Guadalupe worked for a company called Elliott Electric. He hadn't worked there terribly long, but he had worked there long enough to be eligible for health insurance. And Elizabeth had some health issues. She had some health issues, and she was his legal spouse. So she let him know that she wanted to be added to his health insurance. Guadalupe did not want that. He knew that that was going to cause him problems at home, so he kind of tried to put her off. But she persisted. And sometime before August 2nd, 2017, they met up at his work, Elizabeth and Guadalupe, on his lunch break, where again, she persisted, I want to be on your health insurance. So Guadalupe put her off. They went their separate ways. Then fast forward to August 2nd, 2017, Guadalupe went into work like he would any other day. But prior to that, we know that the 2 of them had been communicating by phone all day long. There were long phone calls, short phone calls. They communicated by phone, we have the records, and they made a plan to meet up later that night. Now, Guadalupe at Elliott Electric was a driver, okay? And the drivers, they used work trucks. These trucks were equipped, some of them with cameras, all of them with GPS units that tracked their every movement. Guadalupe used one of those trucks with GPS. That evening, he went into work. Like any other night, he got ready. He talked to his boss before he left on his route. And I say route because they were very specific about the routes that they took. You weren't supposed to go off route. You weren't supposed to make unexpected stops. And if you did, you could be reprimanded. And if you did, they were recorded, right? Prior to going on his route, he talked to his supervisor, and you're going to hear from him. He asked his supervisor for some plastic wrap, okay? His supervisor didn't think there was anything unusual about that at the time, okay? But they were trying to cut costs, and he knew Guadalupe had no reason to need a big piece of plastic wrap, so he told him no. Guadalupe went on his way. He goes down 281 North, he goes on his route, and he has one stop to make that evening, and it's at their Kennedy store. You're going to hear about that. But prior to going to the Kennedy store, he stopped at a location called Chive Drive. It's kind of a cul-de-sac on a street. You're going to hear a lot about this location because that's the first crime scene. He stopped there briefly, he checked it out, he scoped it out, and he went on to the Kennedy store. You're going to see an image of him at the Kennedy store holding that big piece of plastic that he wanted, okay? He gets the piece of plastic, he finishes his business at the Kennedy store, and he leaves, heads back to the office here in San Antonio, but before doing that, he goes to Chive Drive.
On August 2nd, 2017, Elizabeth told her ex-husband, Joe Munoz Jr., that she was heading to work. However, instead of going to her workplace, she arranged to meet Guadalupe at a secluded area known as CH Drive. Guadalupe, a driver for Elliott Electric, deviated from his designated delivery route that night. GPS tracking placed him at multiple locations along the route, raising suspicions about his movements. Before leaving work, he requested plastic wrap from his supervisor, which was denied. Later, surveillance footage showed him picking up a large piece of plastic at another location.
Okay? Elizabeth, in the meantime, is in San Antonio. At about 10:30, she leaves her house. She lives with Joe and their young daughter, Emma. She leaves the house. She tells him, I'm going to run into work. She works at a hospital. I'm going to check on some things. Joe didn't think that that was unusual. You're going to hear from him as well. She had kind of a funky schedule at the hospital. I'm going to go into the hospital and I'll be home after that. She didn't go into the hospital. She went to Chive Drive, where her and Guadalupe would meet up regularly. She went there and she never left there alive.
Elizabeth never returned home that night. 6 days later, on August 8th, her body was discovered in a wooded area near Interstate 37 North in San Antonio. Her abandoned car was found parked along the highway, with forensic evidence inside suggesting foul play. Elizabeth's family grew concerned when she failed to return and reported her missing. Their efforts led authorities to find her vehicle, prompting a deeper investigation.
We know this because at that crime scene, her blood is pooled on the asphalt where it looks like a tire is pushed over it. The blood is around the rim of the tire. Her hair is also on the asphalt. So we know that she was killed there, okay? Because there's her blood, her hair on the asphalt. After Guadalupe killed her, he loaded her into her car. It's actually Joe's car that she borrowed, but loaded her into the back of a small SUV. We know this. We'll talk about that in a second. He drove her around the corner of the street to an electrical easement that cars drive up and down, and you can tell because the grass is smoothed out. There's a tire tracks, okay? He drives down the electrical easement, he dumps her body in the woods, puts a branch over her, takes her clothes, has her phones, and leaves her there for the next 6 days until she's found. He then gets in her car, he drives it off the electrical easement, he parks it on the side of a highway on Old Pearsall Road, he walks through a field, back to his truck that had been stationary for 51 minutes, and he drives back towards San Antonio. How do we know this? Because we have 3 cell phones, GPS, that are tracking each other the entire way. And you're going to hear this information, the triangulation data, the GPS data, the cell phone data, from FBI Special Agent Mark Sedgwick, who's going to walk you through all of that and the phone calls that led up to their meeting. So he headed back to San Antonio, but before he did that, his GPS and these phones showed that he stopped on 281 around the Almost Basin area, so not far from downtown. And he stopped there for several minutes. He threw her clothes, he threw her cell phones over the side of the highway. That's where they were found. That's the last place they pinged. That's the last place her family located her on their phones. And he drove back to the office, okay? He drove to the office and again had contact with his supervisor, and his supervisor didn't think much of it then because Guadalupe wasn't acting like he just murdered somebody, but he noticed that Guadalupe was a little bit disheveled and he had a leg injury, okay? He had a leg injury that he didn't have before he left. And he had a black shirt on and shorts, you'll see these in photos, that it looked dirty, okay? Almost like he had dirt on him. Guadalupe finished his business up there, left with Alice, because that's who was picking him up, and probably thought and hoped he had gotten away with murder. But what he didn't count on that evening was that she had a family that cared very much about her, that took immediate action. When Joe woke up in the middle of the night and she wasn't there, he knew that that wasn't normal, okay? Elizabeth would never say she was going to come back and not come back. She would never leave their daughter. She would never not show up to work the next day. So Joe and the sisters and the family started communicating immediately, looking for her, calling her cell phone, pinging her cell phone. It was located at the Almost Basin and never moved. That was unusual. So they made a missing persons report. Joe reported the car stolen to get the cops involved in that aspect. And they made a post on Facebook asking the community for help if they've seen anything or seen the vehicle. And sure enough, somebody responds to that and says, hey, I saw a car that matches this description out on Old Pearsall Road. So the family goes out there and the police go out there, and sure enough, it's Joe's car. You can peek in the window and see Elizabeth's purse in the back seat, or in the front seat, which is unusual. You can see Emma's car seat that's in there, some of her toys. When the police processed the car, they found blood everywhere. There's pooled blood in the back where he put her in the back of the SUV. When they do the blue light, you can see the outline of a body curled up in the fetal position, the pooling of the blood. There's blood on the interior sideboards. There's blood on the steering wheel smeared around it like somebody tried to wipe it away unsuccessfully.
Forensic testing inside the car revealed traces of blood. Investigators uncovered phone records showing that Guadalupe and Elizabeth had been in frequent contact on the day of her disappearance. Additionally, his work supervisor testified that he had strayed from his designated route on the night of August 2nd. When questioned by police, Guadalupe denied seeing Elizabeth that night. However, digital evidence contradicted his statements. Alice Diaz later provided authorities with the clothing Guadalupe had worn that night, which contained traces of blood.
It's a murder, right? And by this time, they had some of the cellular data. They had some of the information about who she had been in contact with, and so they began their investigation. So they bring in Guadalupe Contreras on August the 5th, and they talk to him. And of course he says, I didn't talk to her, I didn't see her, I don't know what happened to her. But they know that's a lie, right? Because they have the phone records, they know who he talked to and who she talked to. But that's not enough to arrest him, so they let him go. They also know that he lives with Alice, and they know that Alice and Elizabeth aren't the best of friends, so they bring Alice in to question her. She paints a totally different picture of the dynamics. She also tells them, I know exactly what he was wearing that night in response to their questioning. He was wearing a black shirt, some cargo shorts, and as a matter of fact, I haven't done the laundry yet. So she invites them back to her home to get the clothing, and they do. And what do they find on it? Blood. So they take that in as evidence, and they continue their investigation. They bring Guadalupe back on the 11th after they have more evidence, and they arrest him. And I will tell you, like Lauren said, we don't know how he did it, but we know that her blood is pooled on the asphalt in the location that they met. We know that his car was stationary and her car was moving to where the bodies were dumped, and all the phones go with it. We know that her body's found in the woods. The autopsy will show you that she had irregular defects on her skull. She had trauma to her skull. She had a broken hyoid bone, like she was maybe choked. There was plastic, little torn plastic, like what he was holding in that store in the car. We have all sorts of information that lead directly to him having murdered her. We don't know what he used because, like somebody pointed out during jury selection, sometimes animals would eat the body or decomposition occurs, and that's exactly what happened. By the time the ME found the body, or by the time the police found the body, all of the internal organs had been eaten. The skin on her face was gone. Her body was unrecognizable. And unfortunately, you'll have to see photos of that. They identified her with dental records, but like I said, there were defects in the skull that wouldn't have been there absent some sort of blunt force trauma.
With this evidence, Guadalupe was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
True bill of indictment. In the name and by authority of the state of Texas, the grand jury of Bexar County, state of Texas, duly organized, impaneled, and sworn as such at the May term of 2023 of the 226 Judicial District Court of said county and said court at said term, do present in and to said court that in the county and state aforesaid and interior to the presentment of this indictment. Count 1. On or about the second day of August of 2017, Guadalupe Contreras did intentionally and knowingly cause the death of an individual, namely Elizabeth Contreras, hereafter referred to as the complainant, by a manner and means unknown to the grand jury. Count 2. On or about the second day of August 2017, Guadalupe Contreras, hereinafter referred to as the defendant, did intentionally, knowingly, and recklessly cause serious bodily injury to Elizabeth Contreras by a manner and means unknown to the grand jury. And during the commission of said assault, the defendant used a deadly weapon, to wit, the defendant's hands and an object unknown to the grand jurors, that in the manner and of its use and intended use was capable of causing death and serious bodily injury, and Elizabeth Contreras was a member of the defendant's family as described by section 71.003 of the Family Code. Against the peace and dignity of the state, signed the foreman of the grand jury.
Prosecutors argued that he intentionally caused Elizabeth's death and used physical force, along with an unknown object, to inflict serious harm before disposing of her body. His initial trial in 2023 ended in a mistrial due to the destruction of crucial evidence by the San Antonio Police Department, which initially categorized the case as a sudden death rather than a homicide. The retrial began in February 2025. Prosecutors presented GPS data, phone records, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence, arguing that Guadalupe had planned the attack. They pointed to his suspicious behavior before and after the crime, including his request for plastic wrap and the retrieval of a large plastic sheet. Expert testimony confirmed that Elizabeth's injuries were inconsistent with an accident. The defense attempted to shift suspicion to Elizabeth's ex-husband, Joe Munoz Jr., suggesting he had made threats against her. However, this argument failed to counter the overwhelming forensic and digital evidence.
Count 1 punishment verdict. We, the jury, having found that the defendant, Guadalupe Contreras, is guilty of the offense of murder as charged in count 1 of the indictment, now return this verdict as to his punishment. Number 1, we assess his punishment at confinement in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a term of 75 years. In addition, we assess no fine. Count 2 punishment verdict. We, the jury, having found that the defendant, Guadalupe Contreras, is guilty of the offense of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon causing serious bodily injury to a member of the defendant's family as charged in count 2 of the indictment, now return this verdict as to his punishment. We assess his punishment at confinement in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a term of 75 years. In addition, we assess no fine.
After deliberations, the jury found Guadalupe Contreras guilty of murder and aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison, with a requirement to serve at least half of his sentence before being eligible for parole. The verdict provided closure for Elizabeth's family, marking the end of a long and complex legal battle. Tyler Jackson, better known by his stage name Y&R Mookie, grew up in Arlington, a neighborhood in Jacksonville, Florida. He became involved in the local rap scene, gaining popularity for his gritty lyrics and association with the rap crew Y&R, Young and Reckless, a group that was reportedly linked with the KTA Collective. Mookie's music reflected street life in Jacksonville and often featured references to violence, rivalries, and life in the trenches. Among his known rivals were Youngeen Ace and members of the ATK crew. Despite his talent and growing fan base, Jackson's life offstage was plagued by run-ins with the law. His criminal record dates back to 2015, when he was still a juvenile. That year, he was charged with domestic battery, resisting arrest without violence, and making threats. He was placed into a youth offender program, and the case was dropped upon completion. However, that was only the beginning.
Criminal history beginning back in 2015. That it shows a consistent pattern of not learning from mistakes. 2015, he entered a plea to, in juvenile court, of domestic battery, resisting without violence, making threats. He completed a youth offender program, and it resulted in that case being dropped, because that was part of the terms of the agreement.
Soon after, he faced additional charges, including carrying a concealed firearm, burglary, and driving without a valid license.
So then we move on from him getting these charges dropped after he's in a plea of guilty to them, there's carrying a concealed firearm also in 2015. So he's sentenced to probation. There's a carrying concealed firearm and a resisting an officer without violence. And so he is, for the carrying concealed firearm, he's withhold adjudication of delinquency. He's placed on probation. He's given another shot, another chance. And so then there's a violation of that probation in later in 2015. He doesn't make it very long indeed before there's a violation of that probation. So then in 2015 CJ 4515, he's enters a plea of guilty to burglary of an unoccupied dwelling. He's adjudicated delinquent. He's put on probation after he's committed to a non-secure residential, and he violates that probation again. He violates his probation when given an opportunity. In a 2016 case, another burglary of a structure or conveyance, resisting without violence was null pros, and loitering and prowling was null pros. So then in that case, he's put on probation and he violates it again, by another violation of the probation. And then we have the possession of a firearm by adjudicated delinquent, in which he pleads guilty. He's just sentenced to jail. So I see a consistent pattern of violating the law. He's driving with no valid driver's license. And while that may be considered minor, one might think that driving without no valid driver's license is minor. The fact is that it's just another incident of him not complying with the law. In fact, there's two incidences of no valid driver's license. There was one in 2018, and another in 2019. And again, it's while it's not a serious crime, it's just another indication of Mr. Jackson's thumbing his nose at the law. And so my concern is that this is now the third firearms offense for which you've been held responsible.
Time and again, Jackson was placed on probation, only to violate the terms. The courts gave him multiple chances, including probation and non-secure residential commitments, but each time he reoffended. His legal troubles spanned years, and by 2018 and 2019, he had racked up several more violations, including 2 more incidents of driving without a license. In January 2019, Jackson was arrested again during Operation Wrap Up, a Jacksonville Sheriff's Office initiative targeting individuals who glorified guns, gangs, and violence on social media and in music videos. Prosecutors accused Jackson of being a gang member and using his music videos to promote a criminal lifestyle. He was charged with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The case went to trial, and in February 2022, a Duval County jury found him guilty. Prosecutors used his own music videos as key evidence, pointing out scenes that featured firearms and references to gang affiliations. Jackson denied being involved in any gang, but the judge rejected his claim, calling it not credible. During the April 2022 sentencing, Judge Meredith Carbula reflected on Jackson's criminal history and his influence as a public figure.
And Mr. Jackson, I watched the music videos, and I have to say that I'm appalled at the content of them, at the direction. But one thing that really sticks out is Mr. Jackson is a talented young man that could do anything he wanted with his life if he made the right choices. And I think that the video spoke loud and clear to the jury of what the purpose of that video was. It may have been some art, but that wasn't what it was for. I don't find Mr. Jackson's assertion that he's not a member of the Young and Ruthless credible. I find that he is not credible when he makes that assertion. And not only that, but I think it's very clear of what a charismatic leader he is in the Young and the Ruthless. When people look up to someone who commits crimes, that's a shame, I think. It just seems that your intent on, rather than becoming that successful artist that you could be with all the potential in the world you have, of just making the decision that you would be rather associated with a criminal gang and make videos that promote or in furtherance of the criminal gang.
She noted his musical potential, calling him a talented young man who could have succeeded if he had taken a different path. However, given his pattern of behavior and continued ties to gang culture, she declared him a danger to the community.
So I find that you are a danger to the community. And I find that the only way to protect the community from you is to put you in prison. But I'm not going to put you in prison for 20 years. I'm going to put you in prison for 10. So I'm going to adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to 10 years in the Florida Department of Corrections, to be followed by 5 years of probation. And during that period of probation, you'll not associate with any criminal gang members. And you are going to complete the Authentic Manhood program. I'll give you credit for 739 days. And court cost in the amount of, I'll tell you what, I'm going to waive your court costs.
Though prosecutors had pushed for a longer sentence, the judge settled on 10 years in prison. Conditions of his probation included no gang associations and mandatory completion of the Authentic Manhood program. He was credited for 739 days already served, and his court costs were waived. As of now, Tyler Jackson is serving his sentence in the Florida Department of Corrections with a projected release date of January 4th, 2027. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.